want to, because we are live. If you are with us as on YouTube or even on the podcast, thank you so much for being here. You're more than welcome. We are, of course, Rooted Voices, Sacred Bones. We're here to dip into your world and offer you some depth, insight, and perspective that you may not otherwise receive, and hope that something here will serve you. Today, Jillian is going to host our meeting, and she has a topic for us, and chances are good we're going to veer off topic and go other places. But Jillian, please get us started.
Welcome today. And yes, and one of the things that I work with in my business is talking about how we obtain what is called a work-life balance. And for the longest time, that word, I know we had a couple episodes ago where Jean didn't like a word. And this is a word that really kind of gets me, because to me, I don't ever see it being a full balance. And I think people are trying to attain something that is, I think, to some degree unattainable. So this is not something that any of us have talked about between each other. And so I'd like to kind of bring that up and just, what does that mean to you in you, not only where you are right now, but maybe think about where you were 20, 30, 40 years ago. And did it mean something different at different points in your life? So I'm going to jump to Jean so I can give Joanne a minute to think about that.
Thank you. Here, come on. I'm old too, you know.
I know.
And frankly, I try really hard not to remember 20, 30, or 40 years ago. Really. My goodness. I don't think I've had balance ever in my life. And frankly, I'm not even sure balance is, I think it's a non word, because there's no real way to attain it. Now, physically, balance totally eludes me. I am surprised if I can go through my day and stay on my feet. Okay. So, balance is not a physical thing for me these days. It's just a dance. Everything's a dance. Everything I do is a dance. Everything I try to resource, everything I try to put together, everything I try to do, it's all a dance into what I can physically do and what I can mentally and emotionally handle at the time. So if you're talking about balance in that respect, I'm not sure there is balance as much as what there is a bit of a dance. And frankly, I'm happy. I think we talked about syncopated rhythm at one time, and that's really what I see my life as being, is really more syncopated.
Yeah, I really do like that. I hadn't thought about it. See, this is why I like these conversations, is because when we connect in with things that, the life lessons we've lived, I think we can come up with different terms, and maybe even different definitions of what things mean to us. So yeah, and I've been looking for a word for a long time to replace balance. And I love the word dance, because when you think about it, dances can be very formal. And you've got certain steps that you're going to take. And then dances can be very creative in that you make them up as you go along, which I think a lot of work life is made up as we go along. So
it's all freestyle, honey. All freestyle.
So Joanne, what do you think about when people talk to you about a work-life balance?
Well, I'll just go by the conversation between you and Jean already, because a couple of really cool ideas showed up. You said balance and dance. And when I was a child, I took something called ballet.
Yep.
And in that situation, dance or movement and balance work together to get you from point A to point B across the stage in a really beautiful way. And so the problem for me with balance is that it's static in the first place. You're thinking of a pair of scales that are up here, and they're showing you a balance point, but time is always going on. You can't just stay balanced the whole time. And as Jean has pointed out, there are situations and where people have trouble keeping balance for that 10 seconds that makes them quote normal unquote. And they have to be careful where they go and the hand holds on things and stuff like that, but they're still moving. So I think balance is important for safe movement, right? But we're still not talking static balance. We're talking balance and flow at the same time. And I think what it does in terms of the sort of standard thing that we have now with the, work-life balance business, it really isn't one thing or the other. Just like you were hinting at, it is a flow. It is an allocation of one or the other at any given moment in time to get you somewhere. Get all the roses pruned, get that movie watched, depending on whether you're in the work balance or I don't know, life seems to have work and play in it. So maybe it should be work-play balance.
Ooh. Yeah, I like your image of the dancer going across the stage, in that it's not one thing, it's a combination of several factors moving together. But as you were saying that, another image came across my mind, because yes, we are, the three of us are at a certain season in our life. But one of the things when I was going through physical therapy, when I had my back surgery, was standing on one leg and still keeping your balance. Now, when I was in my 20s, that was an easy thing to do.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But, where I am now in this season of my life, keeping my body balanced is a challenge. So I think that might have something to do, because I think back, when I was a young mother, I had young kids, I was working part-time, I was going to school. I think back now and go, how did I do that? It just blows my mind. And how did I manage taking, the word, because you talked about flow and dance, but it's managing that. How do you manage all that and come out at the end of the day sane?
Pick me, pick me. So something we haven't inserted here is attention and where your attention goes. When you're dancing, your attention goes to the steps you're going to take and where you're going to head. Direction is important. It's important in anything. And there is no such thing as work-life balance. You take your work home and your life intrudes on your work. There's no separating it. I don't care who you are.
Yep.
So there's no such thing as work-life balance. It really is about where your attention is, where your focus is, and what you decide. And that's something I have learned having CMT, is when I first really when it started manifesting quite a bit and it was showing up quite a bit, I had to think about and really focus on every single step I took, every single step. And it was exhausting. It's something you have to learn to do, and it becomes second nature, just like any other thing you learn to do. But it's still exhausting. And when I'm tired now, even when I'm tired now, I have to focus even more because I'm tired. And that's going to happen regardless across the board. If you want to have some semi balance in your life, you've got to pay attention to where your focus is. It's imperative. And then you've also got to learn the steps you have to take in the direction you want to go, because it's all part of it.
So really it's about making choices.
Of course,
and
everything.
As life changes, which changes, if people think that they can control change, well, I'd love to talk to the person who's been able to do that successfully. But, change comes at us in different directions, and, sometimes from more than one direction at the same time. And we have to choose what decision we're going to make, what we're going to prioritize, what boundaries we're putting in place to make sure that we accomplish what we want. And none of that feels balanced to me. It
is what it is.
Yes. And I think a visual that I've had for a long time is the act of, the plate spinning.
Mhm.
And when you have somebody who's spinning plates and he's got, more than two, and then you start adding another one and another one, and how many plates can you spin without dropping one? So it's constantly a managing the process. So,
Yeah. Now, Jillian, I want you to replace that image with another one. Are you ready?
okay.
It's the image of smashing the plates, the Greek
Mm.
dancing and the smashing the plate,
Oh, that's right. Yes.
right?
Mm.
Because the plate spinning don't matter. It's all in the dance. It's all in your intention. It's all in your focus. It's all there. And I, frankly, I've been spinning plates too blessedly long in my life to worry about spinning more plates. So
Yeah.
you're right. I
And
choose
I
to
think
spend
that
time
that
spinning
brings
every
us
day.
into, in the different seasons in our life, it means, I think it means different things to us depending on where we are. I don't think I ever thought about balancing anything in my 20s.
Uh,
I
I
mean,
don't
we were just exploring at that point.
no, I think I was surviving at that point. It's called
Okay.
survival, right?
Yeah.
So when you're in survival mode, which most people are because they're going through all kinds of stuff in their 20s, guess
True.
what? You're not worried about balance. You're
Nope.
just worried on getting through another day,
Yeah.
right?
And then I think, coming into your 30s, things change. You're expanding in different areas, you're growing. I think you're becoming more comfortable in certain areas and more uncomfortable in others. But there again, like you were saying, Joanne, that scale where, if you're using a scale, it's like, what if you got something heavy here? It's like, when somebody says you have, a ton of feathers and a ton of gold, which weighs more? Well, it's a ton. So you're going to have more
Yeah.
feathers than gold, but it's still a ton. But yeah, it's like, how does that work? And I think it's a lot about capacity. What are you adding? And I think the younger you are, you can keep adding and adding, and it doesn't feel like you're in overload yet. But I think the older you get, you realize that overload is not as far away as you thought it was.
I mean, in my case, the overload became patently obvious when I had children.
Mm-hmm.
And it became the overwhelm of keeping track of and keeping track of the children and missing out on individual experiences. There was some resentment there, but I knew I had a responsibility to my kids, but I still remember that frustration of never having a break, always having to be focused, always having to be paying attention to these two little people so they'd stay alive, for one thing. And there are a lot of younger people who do choose, if they do choose to have children, find that out pretty quickly. And then balance becomes finding some way to take a break of any sort. And so it's not like this kind of, it's not like this kind of balance. It's like, just give me a little break,
Yeah.
so I can recover my energies and come back at it, so to speak. So there's
And I
that
think
aspect of it.
that kind of reminds me that, it's a priority. What you make a
Right.
priority becomes a trade-off. So if you're
Yes.
prioritizing children and family, what's your trade-off? Because there's only 24 hours in a day that you can use. And, there are some people out there that have been blessed with only needing 4 hours of sleep.
Right.
The rest of us need like 7 or 8. And so take that away, and that limits how many hours you have to be actively involved in the world.
Uh-huh. Give me 10 or 12 hours, okay, asleep.
Yeah, I have a friend who I don't know how she does it, but 4 or 5 is what she lives on. And I've never been able to do that.
Used to.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. See, it's not just you were mentioning capacity, Jillian. And frankly,
Mm.
capacity doesn't even figure when you're in your 20s and your 30s.
No.
You're not thinking about capacity because you're thinking, I've got to take this on because if I don't, then so and so will, and I'm not going to get this promotion if it's a job thing.
Absolutely.
Or you're thinking, oh, another child, I wasn't counting on this. My gosh, okay, I've got
Yeah.
to take this on. Or how many dogs are we having now, dear? Can you please stop picking up strays? That kind of thing. Every little thing
Mm.
in your life takes some of your capacity away. And sometimes it gets to where the straw, that breaks that camel's back is one more thing, one
Yeah.
more thing. And it doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, then it's like you go from taking care of your children to taking care of your parents or taking care of your
Mhm.
spouse or taking care of, right?
Yep.
And so it shifts, but it's still taking your capacity.
Yeah. And I
Right.
think also one of the things that we've talked about before, and I think this is, it applies to this here. It's your energy.
Mm,
You don't have an unending amount of energy, and
for sure.
and I have mentioned before in other conversations with other people, you talk about burning out.
Mm,
When you've burned out.
mm.
But I think the more challenging part is when you brown out. You're constantly running on low energy,
Oh.
and how much damage
Potentially.
that does to your body as you move forward continually in that space.
Yeah. I think burnout is probably quite more
Mm.
in your face than brownout. But you're always going to pay the cost. And yes, you do have unending energy as long as you learn how to manage it.
Right.
Right. And I'm not saying because even when I'm on my chin strap, I still find the energy because it's still there. Energy isn't created or destroyed. You always have it. It's just the way you choose to utilize it.
Yeah. I remember years ago, my life when my kids were little revolved around waiting in parking lots for them to either show up or pick up or whatever. And I remember listening to an audiobook at the time. And this was a very successful gentleman. And he said that he would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and work and do whatever. But somewhere in the middle of the day, he would do what he called a power nap.
Yep.
And then
Mm.
brought him back. And if you think about some of the cultures around the world, they do it more around, I think, the temperature. So, if you're around the equator, they take time off because it's just too hot to work.
Mhm.
But the sense
Ah.
of being able to split up your day and reboot your energy, I think that helps to be able to,
Indeed.
put a boundary around that energy so that you're not constantly draining it, but you are also in the process recharging it.
Hmm.
Oh, I know what I was going to ask. I'm actually going to ask a question of the two of you. Yay! Just because it came up that way. What do you do to take a break from everything for a while in any given day? I mean, it can include napping, but is there a quiet space in your head and outside in your environment that you can take a break with? Because I often forget to do that, so that's why I'm asking. Because you could shortcut some burnout, I think, if we actually had something, say, quiet to focus our energy on, to focus our attention on, so that we can settle.
Mm.
That's the kind of vibe that's going through my head. So what do you think, Jean?
I'm not certain it's about. I'm not certain it's about power napping or anything,
Hmm.
silent or anything still. It really is
Oh,
about what brings you joy.
okay.
So if you do something that brings you some joy, it fills you right back up, and it's like okay, right. But there are
Yeah.
some times during my day when um, I'm just not interested in joy. I just want to sleep.
Okay.
So I close my eyes, and I don't always get the time I want, I get what I need,
Okay.
right? So sometimes I might think I can get my head down for an hour and it ends up being 35 minutes instead,
Mm.
right? It is what it is. But there are times, I find both work, but I find when I do something I really enjoy, it is so much lighter and so much better and so much more buoyant than anything else. And it recharges my whole day and shifts my outlook.
Yeah. And I think too, I know when my children were little, um, at first I would, when they were napping, I would try to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized that that wasn't a good use of time, because if they were napping, I needed to rest so that we can do that. And now as I've gotten older, I don't have those responsibilities, but I could find myself very easily getting into a project and I could be sitting at my desk for 2 to 3 hours,
Oh.
which is definitely not a sustainable
Mm-mm.
or balancing activity. So even something as simple as making sure that I've always got, my tea, coffee, water at my desk. So I'm drinking. So my body's letting me know, hey, you need to get up and move. And then while doing that, then I'll also go and take a walk around either the house if it's winter,
Good.
or go outside and
Hmm.
enjoy whatever's out there. So kind of tying it into, if I'm not
Right.
going to listen to certain things, I'm going to create things that I can listen to. So you can also set an alarm to do that, to make sure that you get up and move every, 40, 50 minutes and do something other than just sitting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was
Yeah.
going to say I was going to send Joanne to do an intervention if that were the case with you, madam. That's not a good thing.
I
No.
don't need a clock. I have a left hip that is almost to the minute of the hour that
Mm,
tells me it starts
you got,
to ache and it says, nah, you need to
Yeah.
stand up and go move. It's amazing how accurate it is.
Yep.
But
And
that's
interestingly
important.
enough, one of the things that I've learned with going through physical therapy and working with the trainer um, is that if you're trying to get physical balance, you have to stretch your muscles.
yoga, Pilates.
Yep. But how much do we need to then apply that in our life if we want to have a balance in our life? What muscles are we stretching? What are we
Hey,
learning? And how are we
Ooh.
getting ourselves into alignment? Because I really like the word alignment much better than balance, because
that's only
alignment,
you've been working with a trainer. You're going to like that word a lot more.
I am.
I'm just saying.
But alignment means that you're constantly changing one thing or changing another to get in alignment. You're going to go out of alignment at certain times, and that means you have to do something to get back into alignment. Where balance just feels like what you were saying, Joanne, in the beginning. It feels
It's
very
static.
static. Where alignment feels a little bit more like it's got some fluidity to it.
Well, we're meant to be in alignment. That's what we have a spine for. But let me just say
Oh.
that one of the best things to do to get yourself back in alignment is to laugh.
Oh,
Take a sense of
right.
humor,
Oh, yes.
right? And it can be something really ridiculous or it can be nothing at all. Sometimes I find the most serious situations are so laughable. And people think I'm really weird, but my gosh, do I ever find humor in them? Because we take ourselves so seriously all the time.
We do.
Like, don't
We
have
do.
time for that.
We do. But I think too, in using the alignment concept, it's like, are we completely out of whack before we realize that we're not in alignment anymore? Or can we notice the small shifts? And I think that comes down to paying attention.
Comes down to pain too.
Well, yeah,
Hmm.
as we get older, it is.
Well, even if you don't, I'll tell you now, if you're not in alignment, there's going to be pain somewhere and you will
Yeah.
notice it.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if you don't
That's
pay
right.
attention to it, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
That can be at your job, that can be in a relationship, that can be just with yourself. if you're not in alignment with yourself and who you really are, you're going to experience some
Oh yeah.
really uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah.
So,
No.
if there's pain there, you really need to pay attention, even if it's just a niggle.
Yeah, and there again, it comes back down to, if it's a small thing, it's like, well, that's not really that big of a deal. I'll just keep going for a while. Well, your body will only let you go so long before it's like, okay, so you're not listening to that. How about this?
Mm.
How about this 2x4? Okay.
But I do
If
think
that
that,
doesn't work, there's always a brick wall.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, there's that. Yeah, people have run into
I
those.
do.
Yeah.
But I think
Mhm.
that brings us up to then, we've got to be sustainable in what we do.
Oh,
Because I know when I was younger and some of the things I was doing were not sustainable. And that has gotten me into the
oh
pain and
yeah.
the shape that I'm in now, that it's taking a lot longer to get things in alignment or to be healed than it used to do when I was younger. And back to, I think, what Jean was saying, when you're in your 20s, you just think you're indestructible
Mm.
and you don't think this is going to impact you. But if you keep doing what you were doing in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I can't do that anymore. And what damage has it done that I can't fix? So that you're completely out of whack, and it wasn't sustainable. I don't think we talk about that early enough in our lives.
Well, they're not going to listen anyway. We won't anyhow. Did you ever listen to anyone when they wanted to give you advice when you were 20? Probably not. No
No.
one listens. It's like, not going to happen to me, right?
Yeah, driven by dreams of great destiny, driven by hormones, driven by all kinds of other things besides the person trying to give you advice.
Peer pressure,
Peer pressure.
comparisonitis,
Yeah, it's,
yeah,
it's just, there are too many.
perfectionism,
Yep.
expectations of everyone else.
Oh,
Everyone
All
else.
part of
Yeah,
that, right?
that's right. Hmm.
absolutely.
So, and you don't really think about it. It's just normal until you get older and you realize just how abby normal it was. Yeah.
So I think it gets to a point where I wish that I had understood the importance of boundaries and sustainability and alignment earlier
Mm.
on, because it definitely would have been more beneficial. Um, I think I'm still actively involved in a lot of things. I'm still very productive. But like you were saying, Joanne,
Yeah.
it gets to a certain point where body parts start going, no, no, we're not doing that today.
Right.
Jillian, when we came on, you were closing tabs, and that's not productive.
I was.
That's right.
And
Not as
that's
many as there were.
sustainable.
She's telling
And
on me.
sustainability is not sustainable. I'm just saying. That's an illusion. Okay? Because everything changes. And if
It
it
does.
changes, you've got to
Yes.
change with it.
Yeah.
And that's also a good point about having all the tabs open. That means that we're falling into the trap of thinking we can actually multitask at that level, which is kind of silly because, well, humans, the research I know about says that humans' brains are built to do one thing at a time. Although there are people who are better at temporarily managing more than one thing, but we're constantly compromising our own goals really by trying to do too many things at once and never getting to whatever place we're trying to get to.
That's
Mhm.
true.
So stop, maybe pausing for a minute and saying what is, as you said earlier, Julian, the priority. We have such a problem with priorities, especially in today's age of information overwhelm, that being able to set priorities is really important to our own peace of mind as we continue to go about the things
Mm.
that we feel we need to do in a given day. And that would cut down on the stress and enhance your balance there.
Yeah. And I
I'm
think
I'm
another
tempted.
piece,
Sorry.
go
Go ahead.
ahead, Jake.
I was going to say I'm tempted to go the KPI route, the
Yeah.
key performance indicator
Oh,
route,
yes, yes, yes.
because that is something that gets slammed in your face all the time. And frankly, uh, it's like anything else, it's going to change. Everything changes. It doesn't matter what it is. There's not going to be anything that stays static. And key performance indicators are not real. Everything, anything in a number is a number that can be designed to look whatever way you want it to. It's not true. So if you're going to measure anything, just measure the way you feel at the end of the day.
And I think a lot of what we've talked about today falls back on values. What is it that you value in life? And if you really don't understand that, then you're kind of blowing in the wind. But if you have a certain thing that you value and you set that as your priority, and then you put your energy behind it, maybe you can measure where you're going. But I think too, one of the things that we've talked about over the years has been that even values change.
Yes,
Because what has meaning for you today may not have meaning for you next year. And so there is nothing really in life that is set in stone. And so I think that might be that I have that, I have a problem with the word balance when we talk about it. As
honey, I don't like it either. And I will say priorities, as we know it, can change minute by minute.
Yeah.
It's not one thing and then next year it's another one. Every day I set priorities for the day. Doesn't mean I'm going to achieve them, because during my day, some things may change.
Yep.
Right? Because we have unexpected things happening all the time.
Right.
And everyone does. You wake up in the morning, think, okay, kids are going to get off to school. I can get to work at this time. And then you wake up and one of the kids is sick. Right.
Yeah.
So that's like, right. Okay. So then what do you got to do? Well, then you got to adapt. Your priorities shift.
Yep.
And that's the way life just goes. There's no getting around it. You've got to be willing to shift. And that's why I think thinking about everything as a dance, because you can change your step at any given time and you can make it look seamless and beautiful if you choose it. And besides that, even if it isn't, you can laugh like merry heck about it.
You can. And I think going back to the dance analogy, I mean, the music changes. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, and you adapt your steps to what it is. And so, and we do that in life. It's a constant. I think the other word that was brought up today was flow. This isn't, it's not going in one direction all the time. It can take a sharp left turn. And what do you do then?
Change your step.
Yeah. Change your step. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. So I think, one of the things that I find in business is having a strategy helps to know where my next step's going to go. It doesn't mean that I'm going to plan out. I think in business, it used to be long-term goals were 5 to 10 years. Long-term goals now are under 3 years.
Really?
And part of that I think has to do with how technology is changing. Organizations are having to adapt. Everything's shifting. And so, how do you manage your life? And, there again, what season are you in? Where are your priorities right now? Because, like Joanne was saying, when we were younger and we had families, the priority was to make sure that, at the end of the day, everybody was still in one piece, and even ourselves. And I think sometimes that, ourselves weren't as well put together as everybody else. And now that we have time for ourselves, we're starting to reap some of those oats that we sowed that maybe should have spent a little bit more time. Like you said, how do you carve out time to do things for yourself? And it's so important. When I talk to business clients, it's like, we have time on our business, we have time in our business, and we have to absolutely have time off our business. And that's that time where you regenerate and your creativity flourishes and you dig into things like Jean was saying, what brings you joy? and
And you do that in your business anyway. If you're not, you're missing a trick.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people that are in business just because, and they don't own the business, they work for somebody else, but it's like, I've just got to get to this stage, or I've just got to get to that stage. And, I don't want to lose my seniority. I don't want to lose this. And it becomes, a constant.
Right.
I
And
think
see,
it's the
that
word
brings us
battle.
to another thing too, because I think if you're in a job, then you better start planning an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, they're going to exit you before you have one.
Yep.
It's just how it goes.
And
Your
then where
job
does
is
your
not
work-life
guaranteed.
balance go when you've just got the pink slip?
Well, that's another thing, isn't it? But this is all part of, you're talking about balance. Balance says get a job, yeah, but plan your exit strategy the day you take it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're going to be unprepared when it happens.
Yeah.
So that
Well, and I
means you
think
still build
even the
relationships and everything, not just in your job, but in competition and in other places, and maybe lateral moves and lateral companies, and make sure that you're planning.
Yep. And I think too, as much as the long-term planning has gone down to shorter term planning now, I think the amount of times that people who are changing jobs has gone up exponentially.
Oh yes.
I mean, because, the thought process of being in one job or one career for a lifetime that our grandparents or great grandparents had is long gone. I mean,
Long gone.
it's, yeah. And
Yeah.
then there again, I've worked in higher ed, and we've talked years ago that, the jobs that these students are going into when they come out of college don't exist.
Well,
And that is even more true today.
academia is a whole different industry to most.
It is.
When I was working, it was like there's this, and then there's the academic world, and we'll not have nothing to do with them because this is what we're doing, right? There's no real crossover in some
No,
instances
huge
there.
disconnect in a lot of
Huge
areas.
disconnect.
I know
Yeah.
there are some that do work hand in hand, but I mean, the whole goal is supposed to be that we're preparing people for life, but we're
Yeah.
not really giving them the tools that they need to be prepared for life.
And the question would be, what kind of life?
Mm-hmm.
Humans are notoriously adaptable.
We are.
Um, which
Um,
makes them also notoriously exploitable. So the question is, what is an academic institution or a company doing to enhance the life of a single individual person who's in that space? And probably not much. You kind of have to go in there with a decent idea of what you want to do and press for it. Just like in the healthcare system, you have to be your own advocate, and ask questions and challenge things in order to get a good result. And I think people are getting to where they learn that. But the only generation that I can think of that really had a lot of stability was my parents, who were born in the early part of the Depression and were children during that time. And so there were some who were suffering quite a bit, but there were a lot of them, a lot of middle class people who kind of got by. But the parents were all worried about losing their jobs and everything the whole time, even if they were able to keep them. And before that, before Social Security and Medicaid and things like that, you were on your own. My grandfather was on his own. He got lucky and didn't lose his job when the Depression started. But in the 19th century, what? Every family was on their own. They would get a job in the Industrial Revolution somewhere. But until unions came along or other kinds of forces to actually support people, you had to be pretty adaptable.
well,
All the
there
way
were
from
some
that. Yeah, go ahead.
very enterprising people back then,
But yeah, they'd have
right?
to be. Yeah.
To
Hmm.
be, yeah. But you've always been on your own, even when you don't think you are.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that. I was I was laughing earlier because I kind of read a post on LinkedIn, a web designer, and he said, I was going, I'm going to paraphrase and get it all messed up, but I'm going to tell you anyhow the gist of it. He said, I went back to a client I had worked with over 5 years ago just to see what we had done 5 years ago and what we're doing now. And I went back and he said, I was surprised because what we had done had changed so much. And we didn't even know about it. They hadn't said, oh, we're going to change this. Do you think it's a good idea? He said, they just changed it and now it's not coherent. And now it's not converting the way it should. And now it's, you know, if they just left it alone. And I remember reading one of the comments that said, that really does pee me off. Because people are always doing that. They don't leave things alone. They
Oh,
love to
right.
change things. They don't tell you. And I'm not, what I'm saying there is that everything and everybody can't keep their fingers out of anything and they will change things. You will change things in your life every day. And some of it is very unconscious and some of it is with intention.
Yeah.
If you're not sure what you're doing, you better stop for a minute and think about what will happen if I do this? Who is it going to affect?
Consequences, yeah.
And, business doesn't matter, academia doesn't matter if it's corporate, doesn't matter what industry. If you're not putting your people first, you shouldn't be in business.
And I think too that what you were saying about being intentional is important because, reviewing what you've done and just making changes for making changes sake never works. And making too many changes doesn't work either because you're not going to know what impact anything had because you can't put it down to what happened. So number one, reviewing, where are you right now and where do you want to be? And if those two places aren't the same place, then how are you going to get there? And what's the intentional step you're taking to get there? And that always reminds me, my dad was a pilot. And, he's like, when you take off, say from New York to fly to LA, you think it's a straight shot. But those pilots are constantly making adjustments in the air for weather, for other aircraft, for lots of different reasons. And I think life is like that, is that we're constantly needing to readjust to whatever is happening on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, are we happy? Are we fulfilling our needs for ourselves? Are we in spaces that make us comfortable? What do we value in life as we move forward? So,
well, unmet needs are the biggest driver of depression anyway, and anxiety. So if your needs aren't being met, it's time to kind of step back for a minute and just look at that and see if you can figure out ways to adjust yourself because you can't change anyone else.
nope.
Adjust yourself
True.
and see if you can start getting on that pathway so your needs can be met. There's no sense fretting about it. You just got to think it through, check your steps, make sure you're not hurting anyone on the way, and go. See if you can make that happen because no one is going to do it for you.
Nope. We are creative, curious human beings. And I think some of that curiosity kind of gets lost along the way as we get older. But I think one of the best things to do is to bring that back and be more curious, continue to act like a little 2-year-old and ask why.
Hey, no whys, no whys.
Oh, that's right. Jean doesn't like whys.
No whys.
No.
Talk to me.
What?
Talk to me, and I will get your curiosity going again. They don't call me the great nudger for nothing.
There you
That's
go.
right.
So as we wrap this up, Joanne, do you have any closing thoughts to add on this?
Just remember to dance.
Hey.
Love that. I love
And do it
that.
in style
That's right. Put your best
Absolutely.
duds on.
So
or not.
remember that, we only have this one life. So, make sure that you make it matter and
And
make
you
the
can
right
do it all naked.
Jeez. Some people do.
Hey, you're naked under your clothes.
You
Oh,
are.
right. That's true.
Absolutely. And I thought we were going to get in trouble last week when we had our guest on.
I'm not sure we're going to get in trouble this week. We're just having fun. Everybody
Yeah.
has
So
fun.
I am going to hand this back over to Jean to close us out. And thank you so much
Aw,
for being with us today.
aw, we were having fun. I guess we got to go sometime, though. So if you're listening or watching, thank you very much for being with us. I hope you had some fun here, too. And I hope you found something in this conversation that will serve you. Please do leave your comments. Be sure you and what do they call it? Like, subscribe, and ring that bell. I'll get
That's
it
right.
sooner or later, ladies, if you're on YouTube. And if you're on the podcast, I certainly hope you found something here to help you. Until next week, everyone, thanks so much for being here. Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Jillian.